The click that holds an empire. The first sound isn't a scream, it's a click. A dry, insect-small noise, metal meeting metal, so quiet it barely deserves to exist. Yet in the cold before dawn, on the northern frontier, where the land turns to grass and the grass turns to nothing, that click feels louder than a drum. Subscribe to the channel, like and share in the comments what you know about these legendary warriors. And now, let's get back to the story. You can always tell the new recruits. Their breathing gives them away. They inhale like they're still allowed to be human. The veterans don't. Veterans breathe the way a crossbow breathes, once measured and then held. Because the weapon in your hands isn't like a bow. A bow asks you to keep believing in your own strength every second you hold it drawn. Your arms tremble, your heart betrays you, your muscles negotiate with fear. A crossbow doesn't negotiate. You draw, you lock, and then you wait, with death already loaded, already certain, already patient. That is why the Han loves it. That is why the frontier fears it. The officer walks the line behind you, boots crunching frost. He doesn't look at faces. Faces are temporary. He looks at hands, calluses, cuts, the clean half-moons where string has bitten skin, the nail beds stained with oil from the armory. He pauses at your shoulder and taps the bronze housing near your trigger with 2 knuckles. Stamped, he murmurs, as if speaking to the metal itself. Standard. Standard, the Han's favorite word. It means the parts fit. It means the bolts fly straight. It means the same training works on any boy pulled from any village. It means the Empire can make you replaceable without ever saying the word. Ahead, in the fog, something moves. Not a man, too many legs. Horses. You hear them before you see them, hundreds of hooves, distant thunder, a storm that decided to become an animal. Someone whispers a prayer, another spits like he's trying to spit the fear out of his mouth. The officer leans down so close you smell his breath, millet wine and winter. He says, "Remember, you don't shoot the rider first." You swallow. He smiles without warmth. You shoot the horse. The fog thins, the steppe opens its mouth, and the Han crossbow line, peasants, convicts, sons of farmers and debtors, stands like a wall made of breath held too long. The officer raises his hand. The Empire inhales, and somewhere inside your weapon, inside its bronze heart, death waits on a single small click. The draft, when your name stops being yours. They didn't recruit you with glory, they recruited you with paper. In the village, the summons arrives in a wooden box sealed with clay. The messenger doesn't ride like a hero, he rides like a clerk who knows he's protected by the law, and the law is protected by men like you. Your father reads the characters twice, not because he doesn't understand, but because he hates the truth living in ink. You are of age, you are registered, you are required. That is the shape of Han power, not a warlord's charisma, not a general's speeches, but the quiet machinery of lists, names, ages, households, land, taxes, obligations. The Empire can reach into your life because it already lives inside your records. You try to bargain the way desperate people always do, first with jokes, then with anger, then with silence. Someone suggests hiring a substitute, someone suggests bribing a local official, someone suggests running. Your mother doesn't suggest anything, she just starts sewing. That's another thing the Han understands. Most men won't flee if their mothers are still stitching their winter coat. On the morning you leave, the village doesn't gather to cheer. They gather to watch, because watching is how fear becomes tradition. Old men nod like they're handing you to a furnace they survived. Children stare like they're memorizing the moment where a boy becomes a ghost. At the commandery gate, the clerk checks your identity strip, your household registration, and the condition of your teeth. He makes a mark beside your name, and that mark is more final than marriage. You are no longer son of, you are no longer future husband, you are not even man, you are able-bodied. And then comes the first lesson of the Han military. The Empire doesn't ask if you're brave, it asks if you can be shaped. They line you up with hundreds of others, farm boys with cracked hands, dock workers with rope scars, a few thin scholars whose families tried to turn ink into protection, and men who look away too quickly. Convicts, branded by their past, offered a chance to bleed somewhere useful. Your squad leader is older than you, but not old. Old doesn't survive the frontier. He looks over you like livestock. He decides, crossbow, and you don't know whether to feel relief or terror. He points at your shoulders. Not built for the long bow, but you can learn to lock steel and hold still. And just like that, your future becomes mechanical.
Where metal becomes doctrine. The Han armory smells like oil, wood, and obedience. The first thing that shocks you isn't the weapons, it's the sameness. Rows of crossbows hang like sleeping animals, identical in length, identical in shape, each with its bronze trigger housing catching the light. Baskets of bolts sit stacked and counted. Coils of string rest in sealed jars, protected from damp like sacred thread. A master armorer, hands black with soot, eyes sharp as a blade's edge, tells you something you'll never forget. An empire loses wars when it cannot replace what breaks. He lifts a bronze trigger housing and drops it into your palms. It's heavier than you expect, dense, cold, indifferent. "Look," he says. You see fine lines scratched into the metal, stamps, marks, sometimes even inscriptions. Proof of origin, proof of inspection, proof that the Han does not merely build weapons, it tracks them. A bow is a man's art, the armorer says. A crossbow is the state's art. He shows you the mechanism, the claw that holds the string, the sear that releases it, the lever that translates a finger's twitch into an execution. He shows you how each part fits, how it can be swapped, how a broken piece does not end a weapon's life. Standardization isn't romance, it's cruelty disguised as efficiency. Because if the parts are interchangeable, so are the men. Training begins before you ever fire a bolt. You learn to assemble and disassemble in the dark, hands moving by memory. You learn to check the nut and the groove, to feel for hairline cracks, to oil the metal without drowning it. You learn that negligence isn't a mistake, it's a crime. The instructor makes an example on day 3. A recruit's trigger fails inspection, the mechanism slips. The instructor doesn't ask why. He calls the squad leader forward, then the whole squad. You are responsible, he says, not the recruit, the squad. That's the second lesson. Under Han law and discipline, you do not only own your actions, you inherit the consequences of others. Fear becomes communal, loyalty becomes survival. By the end of the first month, you don't just carry a crossbow, you fear it properly. You begin to understand the Empire's obsession, a weapon that can be taught quickly, maintained systematically, and held drawn without shaking is the perfect solution for an army built from farmers. And the Han army is a river of farmers. How a peasant learns to kill like a machine. A bow turns you into a hunter. A crossbow turns you into a component. The drills are endless and humiliating at first. Stance, lock, hold, breathe.
Your cheek must press the stock the same way every time. Your eye must find the same line down the groove. Your finger must rest on the trigger without squeezing early, because early is not mistake. Early is execution worthy. The instructors don't talk much about honor, they talk about timing. One bolt is a threat, a volley is a law of nature. They teach you to fire by sound, a wooden clapper, a shouted count, a flag flicked in the corner of your vision. The entire line must release in a single instant so the sky becomes a wall of iron. They teach you reload discipline. The man in front kneels, the man behind reloads standing, the third rank steps forward as the first rank rises, a dance of substitution, a rhythm meant to keep bolts flying even when your hands are numb and your heart is a trapped animal. Some crossbows are lighter, drawn by hand, others are heavier, drawn with a belt hook, a lever, sometimes even a small winch. The heavy ones are slow, but their bolts hit like judgment. The instructors love to demonstrate on armor plates. The plate shudders, the bolt sinks deep. Then they show you the real target, a wooden horse frame wrapped in hide. The bolt does not politely stop, it punches through. Cavalry, the instructor says, voice flat. Men think the rider is the danger, the horse is the weapon. Break the weapon. You practice aiming low, not heroic, not cinematic, low. Knee, chest, shoulder of the animal, anywhere that turns speed into panic. And then, because the Han is always honest about one thing, they teach you what happens if you disobey. They march you past the punishment yard, a post, ropes, a man tied in silence, back already striped red, mouth stuffed with cloth to keep the sound from infecting the rest of you with courage. Discipline, the officer says, is not kindness, it is prevention. By the time you finally fire your first bolt at distance, you're not excited, you're relieved, because your hands obey without asking permission. And that's the third lesson. The Han does not train you to be fearless, it trains you to be automatic.
The Empire's second village. War is not constant fighting. War is mostly waiting with the wrong people. The barracks are crowded, loud, and full of smells that cling to your clothing like shame, sweat, boiled millet, damp straw, old leather, and bodies packed too tight. You learn the social map quickly. The men who talk too much are hiding fear. The men who talk too little are hiding plans. The men who pray are either desperate or dangerous. The men who laugh at pain are already half dead. At night, stories spread faster than disease. Someone says a unit on the Western Road was wiped out by steppe riders who came at dusk, silent as wolves. Someone else swears they found bolts in the corpses, Han bolts, meaning traitors, defectors, brothers shooting brothers from the dark. That's how dread becomes mythology. It doesn't need proof, only repetition. Rituals develop because men cannot live without patterns. You see recruits rub dirt into their hands before inspection, believing it hides trembling. You see older soldiers tie red threads around their wrists, charms against arrows, against ghosts, against the sudden weight of thinking too much. In the corner of the barracks, a man with a shaved forehead and an expression like stone lays out yarrow stalks and mutters over hexagrams. He claims he can read the E, the changes, and tell who will die. Men mock him publicly and visit him privately. The Han state is pragmatic with belief. Worship what you want, but march when you're told. Before major deployments, there are official rites, incense, offerings, a commander reading proclamations to heaven and earth, names of ancestors invoked like contracts. The Empire's religion is not about comfort, it's about legitimacy. If the campaign is sanctioned, then dying becomes less like waste and more like service. And yet, beneath the formal rituals, the soldiers have their own secret ones. The night before you march north, your squad leader forces each of you to touch the bronze of your trigger housing and speak your name out loud. Say it, he insists. You say it. Now, he says, remember it, because the frontier will try to take it from you. He makes you repeat a vow you don't fully understand. I will not fire early. I will not break the line. I will not leave a brother's flank open. The last vow sticks in your throat, not because you fear betrayal, because you fear you might be the reason someone else dies. The Han knows that fear is a leash, and it does not waste leashes. Where maps become hunger. The road north is not a line. It's a slow stripping away of comfort. Villages thin, trees shrink, rivers turn to hard ice. The air grows dry enough to crack lips and bleed noses. Each day your breath feels less like yours and more like something borrowed from the sky. You carry more than you thought a human body should be able to carry. Crossbow, bolts, spare string, knife, rations, blanket, water skin, sometimes a shield, sometimes a bundle of stakes. You learn quickly that the Han army is not just soldiers, it's logistics disguised as muscle. Supply wagons roll like a second army behind you. Clerks count grain. Quartermasters argue over shoes. Armory officers inspect triggers even on the march because the Han doesn't trust distance to excuse failure. When you reach the garrison town, it looks like a scar on the earth. Walls, watchtowers, smoke. Soldiers move like ants, constant, necessary, exhausted. This is where you meet the frontier veterans. They have different eyes, not crueler, not kinder, empty in a specific way. A veteran shows you a line of shallow trenches beyond the wall. Digging is fighting, he says. If you dig well, you might never have to prove you can shoot. Beyond the trenches, the steppe stretches, flat and merciless. Somewhere out there are riders who can live on blood and wind, who can sleep in the saddle, who can disappear into grass. Your commander calls an assembly. He doesn't promise victory. He promises consequences. Raiders do not come to fight fair. They come to steal and vanish. We will teach them that the Han does not vanish. He points toward the open land. You crossbowmen are the teeth of the wall. Teeth, not hearts, not minds, teeth. The night you take first watch, the sky is so full of stars, it feels like the gods are watching from too close. Your hands rest on your weapon. You listen to silence until silence becomes a sound. In the distance, maybe imagination, maybe truth, you hear a hoarse snort, and the click inside your crossbow seems to answer.
The moment the bolt becomes real. The first kill doesn't feel like the stories. It feels like a task completed. They come at dawn, always at the edge of light where the world is still uncertain. A small band, testing, not a full storm, just fingers probing a door. A horn calls, flags flick, the garrison wakes like a single organism. You take position behind the trench line, crossbow braced, bolts seated. Your squad leader whispers, "Low." You see them, riders in furs, faces wrapped, bows already drawn. They move with a confidence that makes you hate them. They know this land. They know they can leave. The commander's flag dips. The clapper sounds. Your finger tightens. Click. Release. The bolt disappears into distance, too fast to track. For an instant, you feel nothing but recoil and the sting of string. Then a horse collapses. Not elegantly, not like a theater performance. It collapses like a building failing. The rider flips, hits the ground hard, rolls,
tries to rise. Another volley hits around him. Dirt jumps. Something dark spreads on snow. He doesn't scream. That's what unsettles you most. He looks at the ground as if it betrayed him. The rest of the riders peel away, retreating before your line can become a net. They leave 2 bodies behind, 1 horse, 1 man, and it feels less like victory and more like a message delivered. Afterward, you walk among the fallen with the veterans. Your boots crunch frost in something softer. The squad leader grips your shoulder. "Look," he says. You look. Up close, the bolt's head is brutal in its simplicity. Metal shaped to do one thing and do it efficiently. There's no artistry here, only function. A veteran squats, pulls the bolt free, wipes it on the dead man's clothing, and returns it to his quiver. "We reuse," he says. You swallow bile. He shrugs. Waste is a city habit. When you return to the wall, the commander orders the bodies placed where they can be seen from afar. Not to gloat, to teach, because deterrence is cheaper than battle. That night, the barracks are quieter. Men don't brag, they don't cry. They just stare at their hands like they're trying to decide if they still recognize themselves. You lie down with your crossbow beside you, like a sleeping animal. In the dark, you hear someone whisper a prayer, and someone else answer, "The crossbow already prayed for us." How the Han turns fear into formation. The raiders don't stop, they adapt. So the Han adapts faster. The commanders begin to treat the frontier like a board game played with lives. They study the patterns of raids. They place bait, herds, supply caravans, careless patrols where they want the enemy to strike. Then they build traps out of terrain. Crossbowmen are always part of the trap. You learn the formations with names that sound almost poetic until you realize what they mean. The gate, 2 lines angled inward, creating a funnel. Raiders chase, thinking it's weakness, then bolts rake them from both sides. The riverbank, crossbowmen behind stakes and trenches, spearmen in front, forcing cavalry to slow or crash. The tortoise, shields raised, bolts fired through gaps, men moving like a single armored creature. You learn that the Han's greatest strength is not courage, it's coordination. A crossbow line is useless if it panics, so commanders make panic expensive. Punishments intensify after one raid where a young soldier fires early, wasting the volley. The raiders turn away in time. The commander doesn't execute just the boy. He executes the squad leader for failing to control him. The message is surgical. Your fear does not only kill you, it kills your chain. The next week, nobody fires early. You also learn the Han's love for deception. Scouts spread false rumors in border markets. Captured raiders are released with carefully planted lies. Patrols march loudly in one direction, while the real ambush force moves silently at night. Crossbowmen, normally slow, become the hinge of these tricks. You march with cloth wrapped around your weapon to silence metal. You carry bolts with darkened tips to avoid moonlight glint. You learn to hold your breath when a horse passes close enough that you smell it. And sometimes you do things that make you wonder if the Empire is as civilized as it claims. A captured raider is offered food and warmth, and then allowed to escape on a horse with a broken leg, a cruel mercy. He rides until the horse fails, until his companions must choose whether to slow for him. When they slow, the crossbows speak. That is the Han's most honest doctrine. War is not about fair. It is about ending the enemy's confidence. Once confidence is broken, even brave men run.
Li Ling's shadow on the steppe. Veterans tell the story like a warning disguised as legend. A general named Li Ling marched deep into nomad land with too few men. He was bold, too bold, and the steppe punished arrogance with mathematics. Outnumbered, harassed, pursued, he did not die quickly.
He did not even collapse beautifully. He withdrew, day after day, under constant pressure, building defenses out of whatever he had: wagons, earth, discipline. In those days, a veteran says, the crossbow saved men who should have been dead. They describe a moving fortress, wagons chained in a ring at night, crossbows mounted and ready, bolts stacked like grain. When cavalry swarmed, the defenders fired not as individuals, but as a breathing machine: release, reload, release, turning the air around the wagons into a lethal storm. They say Li Ling's men aimed low until the ground was littered with fallen horses, turning speed into obstacles, obstacles into panic. They say they fought so long the enemy began to fear approaching at all. And still, in the end, numbers win. The veteran pauses at this point, always. Why tell it, you ask? He looks at you with eyes like old iron. Because you must understand what you are. He taps your crossbow. This is not a hero's weapon, it is a survival weapon. The story carries another lesson too, spoken more quietly. Sometimes the Han does not forgive failure, even when the failure is inevitable. Generals are judged by outcomes, not by impossibility. Soldiers are judged by obedience, not by terror. And if you survive a disaster, you may return not to praise, but to investigation. That is how the Han keeps its army sharp, with the blade of consequence always near the throat. You begin to see the psychological trap. The state offers you belonging, ritual, identity, as long as you win. If you lose, you become a problem to be explained. So you fight not only for your life, you fight for your narrative. Because in an empire built of records, the story written about you may be the final punishment. When the steppe itself fights you. Then comes the order that turns rumor into reality. A major offensive, deep north, into lands where even the grass seems hostile. The veterans go quiet when they hear the destination. Some whisper one name: Mo Bay, the desert north of the steppe, the place where winter is not a season, but a weapon. The army that assembles is massive: cavalry, infantry, supply wagons, engineers, scouts. The Han doesn't raid, it commits. Crossbow units march with the infantry corps, guarding the arteries of the campaign, the supply lines, the camps, the choke points where cavalry cannot easily maneuver. At night, you hear the commanders arguing over maps. Not where the enemy is, where water is, where grass is, where horses can survive. Because a campaign against riders is also a campaign against distance. When the wind rises, it's like being sandblasted by the sky. Fine grit gets into your eyes, your teeth, your weapons' grooves. Men cough blood, horses stumble, fires die. And still, the line marches. You realize something terrifying. The Han army is not only fighting the enemy, it is fighting physics, hunger, and the slow erosion of morale. That is where the crossbow becomes more than a weapon. It becomes certainty. A bowman in a blizzard must keep drawing, keep warming muscles, keep believing he can still shoot. A crossbowman can load, lock, and wait. In the worst weather, waiting is power. One night the scouts return with news: the enemy host is near. Not a small raiding band, an army. The commanders don't panic. They do what the Han always does when faced with chaos. They build order. Wagons circle, trenches dug, stakes hammered into frozen ground. Crossbow units assigned arcs of fire. Spearmen placed to protect them. Cavalry held back to strike when the enemy is disrupted.
As you take your position, you hear the old officer's voice from months ago. You don't shoot the rider first. Your hands tremble, not from fear, from cold. You wrap cloth around the trigger housing, trying to keep skin from sticking to metal. In the dark, men whisper prayers, and above those prayers is a deeper, older faith, the belief that disciplined volleys can make even the steppe hesitate.
When the sky becomes a wall of iron. The enemy attacks at first light. They come like weather, fast, loud, unavoidable. You see them crest a low rise, riders spread wide, arrows already streaking forward, hooves tearing at frozen ground. Their confidence is a thing you can almost taste. Then the Han signal flag drops. The clapper sounds. Your line releases. Not one bolt, thousands. The air fills with a sudden thickening, like the sky grew teeth. Horses rear, some crash, riders shout. Finally, the screams arrive, and the perfect forward momentum shatters into chaos. The spearmen brace behind stakes, forcing the cavalry to either slow or impale themselves. Some horses refuse, some don't have time. Your second volley hits lower, exactly as drilled. A horse goes down so hard, the rider flies and doesn't get up. You don't feel triumph. You feel the strange calm of a system functioning. That's the psychological horror and the psychological comfort of mass crossbow warfare. It removes intimacy. It turns killing into arithmetic. The enemy tries to circle, to find the edge of the formation, to exploit panic. But the Han has planned for that. Reserve crossbow units pivot to cover flanks. Shielded infantry closes gaps. Cavalry waits, patient, restrained, until the enemy's lines are broken enough to chase. At one point, a cluster of riders pushes close, too close. You see the whites of a horse's eyes. You see foam on its mouth. You smell sweat and leather and terror. Your squad leader shouts, "Low!" You fire at the horse's chest. The bolt hits. The animal's front legs buckle. It collapses into the stakes, throwing the rider forward into the spears. It's brutal. It's efficient. It's everything the Han has trained you to be. Then something happens that no drill truly prepares you for. A rider breaks through anyway. He's fast, desperate, skilled. He aims straight for the crossbow line because he understands the truth. If he can disrupt the teeth, the whole mouth becomes less dangerous. He raises his blade. For a moment you see his eyes, human, furious, frightened. You cannot reload fast enough. So you do the thing nobody celebrates in songs. You lift your crossbow like a club and swing. Wood cracks, bone cracks. He falls. You don't remember his face afterward. You only remember the sound. Not a scream, a click. The moment the mechanism resets under your shaking hand, and you realize the Empire's deepest trick. It has turned your survival instinct into a standardized procedure. The weapon that teaches men to hold their breath. Months later, back behind walls, you watch new recruits arrive. They look the way you once looked, full of private hopes, private fears, private names. You want to warn them, but warning is not part of doctrine. Instead, you teach them. You show them how to oil the bronze, how to inspect the trigger, how to lock the string so it holds without slipping, how to aim low when horses come. You teach them to breathe like a crossbow. One evening, a recruit asks you if the stories are true, about brutal punishments, about ambush tricks, about commanders who sacrifice men like pieces on a board. You stare at the crossbow in your lap, and you think of the Han, its roads, its records, its walls, its obsession with standard. You answer honestly, but not kindly. The Han doesn't need you to be good.
It needs you to be consistent. He frowns. Is that enough? You watch the sunset bleed over the steppe. It's enough to keep the empire alive, you say. He hesitates. And us? You don't answer right away, because you've learned what the crossbow taught you from the beginning. Some questions are not meant to be held in the mind. They are meant to be locked away, like a drawn string, until the moment you're told to release. So you simply place the weapon in his hands, guide his fingers to the trigger, and make him feel the small, cold certainty of the mechanism. And when it clicks, you see understanding enter his eyes, slow and irreversible. Not heroism, not honor, just the terrifying calm of a boy becoming a component in a machine that spans the world. The Empire crossbow does not merely kill enemies, it kills hesitation. And in doing so, it builds the one thing every empire secretly worships, a line of men who can hold their breath long enough to make history flinch.